Good evening to everyone. Can I get some thumbs up that we're being heard and received? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good to see everybody. We're going to wait for a minute or two here and let the late arrivers kind of trickle in. But thank you all for being timely. And this is Will, who is sitting here. Say hello to Will. Hi, Will. Will is joining us from Philadelphia, the home of the National Football League champion Eagles. I don't know if any of you are football fans. I'm not. I missed the Super Bowl again this year. So I've grown up in Minnesota, where the Vikings have been losing football championships for almost as long as I've been alive.
They've been pretty good recently.
They have, but they haven't gone all the way. They haven't made it to the big show. It's been a lifetime of disappointment, I tell you. Well, Will, I just realized that you are a lifelong Philadelphian, South Jerseyan, and
Yeah. They consider South Jersey to be a suburb of Philadelphia, so yeah.
Well, it's great that you're able to join us here this evening for Photobook Banter. My name, for those who might not know me, is George Slade, and I am based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And it's a real pleasure to be doing this now. It's been a couple of years, sort of was a COVID project originally, to allow people to gather. And some people really like the idea of gathering on Zoom. Some people kind of strayed away from it. I think we're having the experience now of people coming back a little bit and enjoying the opportunity to connect with folks who are not necessarily in the Twin Cities or let's see, where are people? Robert's in, where are you again, Robert? New York, up there in the.
Listen,
Yeah.
all four of your major league teams suck. Be careful what you say.
Okay. Anyway, Skip is here from Maine, right? Are you in Maine right now? Nice to see you. Well, let's see if anyone else has stepped in yet. Often we have people coming in late, so their loss, if we move ahead here. So just a quick bit of biography on Will Harris. Will completed an MFA in photography and integrated media. I think you should explain to us what integrated media is in a minute here, Will, but at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And 2019, he was a finalist in Photolucida's Critical Mass and was awarded their MFA student scholarship. Will has exhibited all over the place, everywhere from India and Denmark to Finland and the US. Received the Black Creative Endeavors Grant awarded by Something Special Studios in New York in 2020. And his first book, and so far only book, is You Can Call Me Nana, which we'll be looking at here in a moment. Will is going to share the original dummy for the book, which was his master's project at Lesley. And we're going to spend a little time doing a bit of a slow walk through this book, which has a lot of material to it. It's not a big book. It's a size of about what would we say, Will, about a journal or a palm?
Probably a journal size. Yeah, palm size. Yeah.
Someone said it was about a Bible size. I don't have a good solid reference for what a Bible size is.
Yeah.
But uh, what I'd like to do first, before we embark on looking at stuff, is do a little bit of listening to stuff. Because one of the things Will has done with the Nana project is to create some soundscapes, sound collages. How do you
I describe them as audio collages.
audio collages?
Yeah.
And the audio collage, I think, does a really beautiful job of setting up the experience of Nana and the communications with Nana. So I'm going to play about a 2-minute clip here. I'm going to share a screen and we'll listen to that and then we'll come back. How do I make this thing go away? All right.
But there's still something wrong, isn't there, Bill? In a moment, you'll know what it is.
I get hurt.
You know who the fellow is behind you?
Somebody else who sits in a chair, I guess.
Well, he's standing.
He's standing.
Yeah, do you not recognize him?
Ah,
That's Bill Beckett.
that's who Beckett.
Bill Beckett.
Bill Beckett.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Do you know a Bill Beckett?
I used to know Bill Beckett. I think.
They never called you Nana?
I'm not mad.
Oh, okay. They never called you Nana?
I'm not mad.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Is it okay if I call you Nana? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. No, just Nana. Thank you. Thank you.
Why?
Thank you. Thank you. Because. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I've always called you. I've always called you Nana.
All right. Man, it'll be all right.
Thank you. Nana will be okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
In sleep, the muscles of the body are relaxed. It's the most perfect way to relax that we have.
Who is this lady?
I remember we said that was Vivian Green.
That's
I love that phrase, the most perfect way we have to relax. Um, so Will, tell us a little bit about what we heard there.
Yeah, so while I was making this work, I was going home probably every weekend to visit my Nana. When I was in Cambridge, I'd drive back down to the Philadelphia area. And I tried to spend as much time with her as possible. Um, I wasn't really photographing her, but I was talking to her a lot and recording our conversations. I didn't quite know what I was going to do with them. And then I had the idea to kind of um, make these collages with audio. So using found audio as well as things from my past and her past as well, things she would talk about, uh, try to combine that and make a audio representation of what I thought might be going on in her mind. Um, uh, Kind of the jumbling of time, people. Yeah, just trying to kind of represent that in the audio form.
I was struck when I listened to the audio collage about how my experience with my father sounded so similar to your experience with your Nana. The sense of being stuck in a sort of a parallel dialogue space.
Yeah.
That I don't know if anyone in the audience has had experience with someone with dementia, but Richard, you do. Um, and it's a very strange space, just to make a broad generalization. So Will, how did the project evolve within the context of the grad program that you were in?
So it started with kind of making the digital intervention. So the images where I was literally going in and kind of photoshopping and doing some erasure. Um, and that was a response to when I was younger, I'd never seen a lot of these family photos. I had been the caretaker for her house. So in cleaning out her house, I had found these images in the basement.
I'll
And
pull them up.
yeah,
I'll pull up the dummy for the book, but go ahead, keep talking.
yeah. So I found these in her basement, and a lot of them were damaged, either from just moisture or her basement would flood every now and then. So a lot of them were molded. And the ones that I could salvage, I'd show to her and I'd say, Nana, do you know who these people are? And she didn't really recognize them. That's actually a photo of her as a young girl, but a lot of the people she didn't recognize. And the interventions were actually just a response to me showing her those images and kind of erasing away elements of them where she'd say like, oh, that person looks familiar, but I can't quite tell who it was. And some of them I was able to figure out through my mom who they were. But
So this guy looks a little like you.
yeah, so that's my grandfather.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the erasures, in part it's, I mean, I look at this picture, I don't know if the mouse or the cursor is showing, but this
Yeah.
picture here with the deterioration
So
is
that's natural to the
right.
photo. Yeah. And that's actually the image on the left is my going from left to right is my um great grandmother, my mom, and my nana, and then it's replicated on the other side of the page, kind of with individual portraits. And that's my mom and nana as a young girl, and it's my nana as well.
And this and there are stories of two houses as I
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah, so there's her house here in Philadelphia, which I currently live in, and then the house that I grew up in that her and my grandfather built in New Jersey. Um, and she kind of had this aspiration. Her and my grandfather built it to live there and to raise their young daughter there. And for a lot of reasons, they never moved there. For one, it wasn't easy for my grandfather to get to work, and my mom did not want to have to go to a new school and make new friends and ride a bus to school. So they wound up staying in Philadelphia. Um, and there was kind of this unrealized future of her not living in this house that was later on gifted to her daughter. and it wound up being the house where my Nana spent the final years of her life. So
Was this the model for the house, the Meadowbrook, or was it another
yeah,
one?
so that was the model without the breezeway and the garage.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's a rancher. And there's some,
And this construction is the house, or
yeah, it's actual these are scans of Kodachromes that my grandfather took. He was an amateur photographer. And yeah, it's the construction of the house.
Mhm.
So trying to speak also about my family's relationship to photography. My grandfather was an amateur photographer, and both of my parents were amateur photographers. So I was able to kind of use those images along with my own contemporary images to kind of tell this story.
That was a very lucky thing for you
Yeah, yeah,
to have that rich of a resource. This is a picture that strikes me obviously because you have stopped time.
yeah.
I don't know whether the clock was stopped that way or.
It was actually, yeah, it was stopped that way. And this was the room that I slept in as a child in her home. Yeah.
And this is in the Philly house.
Yeah, this is in the Philly house. Yeah. And this is a photo that I took of my parents' house. I was really interested in trying to make images that could be slipped into the archive, and the author would be unknown.
Mhm.
Trying to be in dialogue with the archive, uh, explicitly and inexplicitly as well. So you asked me earlier what was one of the things that I couldn't live without in the book. So in the dummy, the audio doesn't actually, there's no text, but it was originally my idea that the book would exist with either a physical copy of the audio, whether that be on a CD, or for my thesis, I made like a vinyl record that had all the audio tracks on there. So Tiffany and I, the publisher of the book, tried to think of a way that we could incorporate the audio, and she thought that having some of the dialogue and in writing that would be my Nana's, and then a handwriting would be my own, would also add a deeper and kind of richer layer to the book.
And how did you end up doing the handwriting? Obviously, your Nana was not one of the writers.
Yeah, so my mom has pretty good penmanship. I lost mine a long time ago, so she filled in for my Nana.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was looking at her house kind of as a metaphor for what was going on with her physically. The house had been vacant for some time and kind of fallen into disrepair. So I was photographing elements of that and, using it as a metaphor to speak to what was going on with her mentally.
Mhm. Here's some of the erasure.
Yeah, so this isn't this is more of a kind of combined image, and that kind of speaks to the conflation of two different memories kind of being collided together. Um, so yeah, this is a photo on the right of my mom as a young girl, and then on the left is my Nana from this beach scene, but she's kind of looking at it in a way that it's kind of like in shock and awe, and kind of speaking to the fact that she didn't really remember my mom being her daughter, her only child.
Right. Right. There was a lot of role changing that went on as she progressed in her dementia, wasn't there?
Yeah, so my mom just kind of took on this role as a caregiver for her and lost the place of her being her only child. And I took on this role of an old friend, someone who she had known for a long time. I was no longer really her grandson.
Right. You did conflate a little bit with your grandfather, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'm named after him. And there were some instances where I got the impression that maybe what little memory she did have of him. She would often say, I had a friend, Bill Beckett, but I was never married to this man. He was a
Mhm.
friend of mine. So I think that maybe I got conflated um, with that.
I think it's really interesting in terms of reading photographs. We get a little insight into an Alzheimer's mind. I think when you ask, who that fellow is behind you,
Mhm.
and the way that she responds is so interesting. Somebody else who sits in a chair.
Yeah.
And like where would that description come from? Why would that sort of surface in that context?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of times where I was just really puzzled by, and my brain would rack and I would try to make sense of it.
Mhm.
That's like I think I say in the statement or a statement somewhere that just trying to make sense of the incomprehensible.
Right.
Yeah.
I have had a hard time understanding the image on the right.
So the image on the right is my mom's wedding veil.
Oh.
So that kind of speaks to this kind of ghostly appearance of it, talks about, the absence of this event that happened. And there's some photos that come up where you see some of the erasure or
Mhm.
is erased from that event.
So this is interesting because it really does give a sense of the landscape in which the new house was built.
Yeah, so it was pretty rural at the time, mostly surrounded by farmland. And an interesting thing about the road where the house was built, that at one point, all the people that owned property and built houses on that land were all members from the same church.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's really interesting. My mom, my nana.
That is such a great kid picture. Oh my God. Let me be anywhere else but here right now.
And this, I guess here I can talk a little bit about working with Tiffany on the design of the book. This is an element that she thought to add. She also kind of came up with the cover image of the book as well. So that's kind of replicated from this photo.
That's Tiffany Jones, who is also the publisher at Overlapse. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, publisher, designer. She's kind of a one-woman show over there. She does a really great job with all of her projects.
She's British. It's a British publishing company, which has
Oh,
some interesting angles to it, doesn't it?
yeah, it's located in London, but she's actually Canadian. I don't
Oh,
know. Yeah, yeah, I don't know how widely that is known. Yeah, I don't know if that's in the bio or not on her website, but she's Canadian. I think she's lived in London for possibly over 10 years. I'm not sure exactly, but she's been over there.
mm.
So yeah, working with her was a real treat. I was a big fan of her book, The Disappearance of Joseph Plummer. Um, and
And
yeah,
Overlapse has done what, about a dozen books over the last 5 to 10 years?
yeah, she doesn't do a lot of projects because it's just her, but she puts out some good quality books and had some pretty good success. Yeah.
Yeah, I know she did a couple of books with Mandy Barker that were quite
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
This image on the left is kind of intriguing.
Yeah, so that when I kind of do a flip through of the dummy, we can talk a bit about a project that was left out of the final version of the book. My Nana talked and described a place that was across from my parents' house. She described it as a school that existed. It was more of this kind of phantom place. It wasn't real at all. But she said that her parents worked there. And the way she described it, it kind of functioned as a home and a school. And the interesting thing about it was that she had always wanted to be a teacher. Both of my parents were teachers. And I learned later that my mom would often come home and play school. And my mom would be the role of the teacher and my nana would be the student. So there's
Hmm.
this weird kind of like playfulness to this idea of her building this school. I was really intrigued by it. And I tried to recreate it with actual physical models, 3D modeling, as well as video game engines, like to try to make an actual navigate a space that you could navigate with a computer. Um, that didn't really work out, so I'm trying to recreate the project with photographs, and that's what I'm working on now. But
Mhm. That's the next big project. There's a big tree. That's a big tree right there.
yeah, so there were a lot of images that were kind of inspired by making the audio collages, and this was one of
Mm.
them.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, so just kind of springboarding off of just the conversations or kind of how I mix the audio with the found audio. Um, really interesting to see where that led me.
This is a picture that I see, the one on the right, as a really powerful Alzheimer's symbol. And one of the issues that I always was concerned with was that I never knew what my father was seeing, what his experience was from the inside. So I always had to be outside and just wondered, was he seeing the world in a jumbled fashion like this, or what did it feel like to be him?
Mhm. When you showed him old photos, was he able to recognize himself and other people, or?
He would say he would point to a picture of his wife and refer to that one. And he had an easier time, I think, recognizing pictures of his mother than his wife.
Okay, yeah, it seemed like with my Nana that childhood memories were easier to come to rather than, I guess, young adult um memories for her.
Is this your hand and hers?
Yeah, so that's kind of toward the end of her life when she was in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one of the digital interventions with the erasure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a photo of her as a young child.
What does the caption say? Can you pick that out?
At the bottom of the image?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so it's her maiden name, McGee.
Oh, okay. So the house had its level of deterioration that.
Yeah, so that's
Mhm.
actually her in my grandfather's bedroom. And there's another image in there in the book, I believe. I don't know if we passed it or not. Um, kind of did we go? Yeah, I think we saw this image. But that's that same wall.
Is that the room that you now sleep in?
No, so we sleep in the second floor front, and that photo is in the book as well. That's the photo with the paper on the windows.
Okay, yep, we saw that much earlier.
Yeah.
This one's interesting.
Yeah, so just kind of thinking about how things are often repeated in terms of speech and
Mhm.
get asked the same question over and over again. So just trying to kind of recreate that visually with uh,
Yeah.
layering things. Another one of the kind of combine images to speak to conflation. More of the digital interventions. So my Nana always had a pretty good sense of humor, and that still like carried on to
Mhm.
when she with her dementia. So I tried to impart a little bit of that into the book with the image on the left. She often used to say to me when I was younger, "Smile, and the world will smile with you." It's from a Billie Holiday song.
Mhm.
So I thought that it would be a good idea to photograph her teeth and name the image that.
Um, there's a recipe that is a real piece of paper that's tucked into the book, right?
Yeah, so there's a pancake recipe that's actually like scanned into the book, but then there's her waffle recipe that is a insert, and Tiffany did a pretty good job of trying to fold it with the actual creases that would have been in the
I
real.
know. I love that presence of the facsimile.
Yeah.
This was this I think is a key image.
Yeah. So this is a photo that I took of her. It's entitled Last Breakfast. I didn't know at the time that I was making it. It was the last time that she was able to walk to the table and eat breakfast under her own power. It's like a 15 to 20-minute exposure. And I felt like after I saw the image, her kind of ghostly appearance really spoke to um, her dementia and that she was kind of a ghost to me of who she used
Mhm.
to be. And then we were kind of these weird ghostly figures to her as well. She didn't quite
Mm.
know who we were. Um, yeah.
And so the duration of this photograph was the actual time it took her to consume the meal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started the camera when she sat down,
Hmm.
and then it ended when she got up.
And this really is the only image that you made of her in a kind of contemporaneous fashion, right? During
Yeah.
yeah, except for her hand in that one picture we just looked at.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the only two.
This is a beautiful statement. Just I should be ready soon. I can hear my father just so clearly in this. And I can hear my mother in it too. My mother, interestingly, is not progressed on a scale of dementia, but she continually talks about needing to go somewhere.
Mm.
And we used to think it was back to home, wherever
Mm.
home was for her. But I think it's become, she wants to go see my father,
Mm.
who has been deceased for almost 3 years now.
Is she aware of that?
She mostly is aware of it. I mean,
Mhm.
she fluctuates back and forth. She sometimes wonders about her own mother, who has been dead for 30 years. And she says, did my mother pass away recently? I don't remember there being any sort of service. And it's the conflation of time, the confusion of time in generations is kind of mind-boggling.
And I often found that there's the immediate shock when that stuff like that is said, and it's just like, how do you respond? Because you want to participate in a way that you don't question their reality. So it's this kind of gentle, like tiptoeing that you have to do.
Almost, yeah, I kept thinking of it as a sort of gentle performance art,
Yeah.
ad-libbing, just being there in the present with them. And my mother would always say, "Oh, George, you do it so well with your father. It's always much better if you go with me to visit him,"
Mm.
because she could never do that. She would
Okay.
always insist upon the past.
Yeah, so and then there's this afterword. I should say Tiffany thought that it was a really good idea to kind of in the original version, which I can flip through now. I didn't have as many archival images just of my Nana. And
Quick note about the QR code. That is
yeah,
a
so the
link,
QR
yeah, a
code
link to
links
the
to the
audio.
yeah, yeah. Um, and one of the
Stop
things
sharing.
that I was interested in is just like telling the story of my Nana, just like the landscape of her whole life. And I'll flip through this now, but um it didn't really come through as well in this. A lot of the same images, but I was looking at this before I was getting ready and just realized how different, the sequencing made the book feel totally different.
Mhm. And this is a little bit larger than the trim size we ended up with.
Yeah.
That brochure was such a fascinating thing. Did you find that in the family archives?
Yeah, so there was a bunch of kind of material about, I guess, when they were selecting what model they were going to build. There were a bunch of plans and a bunch of brochures. There's another one actually that comes up a little bit later in this one.
Yeah, there was the Yorkshire and the Bluebell and the Meadowbrook and the Darbrook.
Yeah,
Those are all the models.
and my Nana was a bit of a, she was very organized, but she was a bit of a pack rat, so she never really threw anything out. So there was quite a bit of material to go through, which was helpful.
So was this how you presented it for your MFA thesis?
Yeah, so there was the book was present, and there was a record player where you could kind of put on some headphones and listen to the audio while you flip through the book.
Mhm.
And this kind of touches on that school idea. Um, and the way I talked about it in the dummy was kind of showing this field that she talked about the school existing in, along with these little inserts that would be like for a class photo,
Oh.
slowly adding characters to the class photo.
Mhm. Tell me about that picture with the bones, the jaw bones.
Yeah, so when we kind of realized that my Nana was going to pass on, I'd been home and my dad told me that he'd found these bones in the backyard. He'd put them in a bucket to kind of wash them off. And I walked outside with my camera and it started to rain. And I looked down and I kind of just made this image. And at the time I was thinking that, kind of looked like tears in the bucket. And then the leaves, kind of reading the tea leaves of what was about to come.
Mhm.
One thing that didn't make it into the book, which is pretty cool, speaking of the things that my Nana saved, these little, I don't know that you can see it, but her name is on there repeated. It says Evelyn Beckett.
Oh,
In a
you
little
cut that and put it into your clothes, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I thought it would be a good bookmark.
That's beautiful. Tiffany didn't like that?
No, I think it would have been a little expensive to recreate.
Could have cloned those labels.
Yeah.
So the feeling that I get is that the visual nature of the original dummy was a little bit more about the modern photograph than the archival photograph.
Yeah. And I think that it didn't, I mean, I feel like this was successful, but I feel like the inclusion of more of the archival imagery, more of the archival imagery, further kind of pushed along that the story was about my Nana,
Mhm.
rather than more so the spaces, which was really important to me.
One of the things I didn't mention in your bio is the fact that these days you're working as in the libraries at Princeton as a
Yeah.
digital materials resource person. There's an
Yeah,
interesting parallel, isn't there?
Yeah, so I'm a digital imaging technician at the Firestone Library. So I photograph rare books and manuscripts, and yeah, there's working with the archival material, and I'm interested in my own family archive. So there is really this kind of overlap and parallel.
Mhm. I would love to invite anyone who's listening to unmute themselves and ask a question. Oh, what's that, Will?
So this idea of including this little mini album, this never fade photos,
Oh.
and actually having these photos eventually fade out wasn't quite practical to
but,
that into the final one.
but it's happening in your dummy.
Yeah.
The fade is happening. It's called self erasure.
Yeah.
Those are very powerful, those manipulated removals of faces and eyes, and I think it's a pretty apt metaphor for the idea of disintegrating memories and perceptions.
Yeah, and I started by actually making physical interventions to the photographs. I was stitching over top of things or weaving images together, and it became more about the act of actually doing that thing to the photograph rather than what was going on in the images. So I found that these kind of digital or photoshopped interventions were the best way to achieve what I was talking about.
Yeah, it looks like it was a little bit longer too.
Yeah. I can stop. But yeah, it goes on for quite a bit. A lot more photos.
That's the enthusiasm of the grad student, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, as I was saying, anyone who feels like they want to join in the conversation, feel free to unmute yourself and say hello and introduce yourself. And if you don't, I'm going to call on people. So I'll just let an awkward silence hang on there for another 10 seconds.
I'll interrupt the awkward silence.
Thanks, Deb.
Yeah. So this is a beautiful, moving book. My grandma Faye had Alzheimer's, and this was in the 80s, long before our family knew anything about it. And I was one of the first, I think, the first person to discover that something was wrong with grandma. So this book, seeing this is bringing back a lot of memories and a lot of emotions. And oh boy, there's the one image, right? There was the big tree First of all, thank you, Will, for doing this book.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, and also seeing the dummy is really fantastic. There's so much richness in there. There's this image right after the big tree, which was, I think, of pretty two panel. There was a panel of darkness, and on the left was also darkness and like a bright, a flashed, illuminated branch of a tree. And it just reminded me of my experience with my grandma, which was there'd be this flash of cognition or memory or something that made sense to me. And most of the rest was darkness for me, from my perception. I don't know where she went, but it was black to me. It was dark to
Mhm.
me. But there was this bolt every once in a while.
Yeah.
I think everyone probably responds to different images in the book in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were things that I responded to that, were different. Will, obviously had a lot of responses to the visual world. Of
Right. Could I ask another quick question?
course.
And that is, Will, when you decided to, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the word that you used to, I don't want to say interfere, to involve yourself with the photo, to erase,
Oh, yeah. Digital intervention is what
intervention.
Yeah.
Thank you. How, what guided you when you looked at the image? What voice said to you, okay, I want to work with this here or this here, if there was anything that guided you sort of intuitively about it?
Yeah, so a lot of them were responses to actual moments of like sharing images with her. So like the ones of my mom, there's an image of my mom and would have been my grandfather coming down the stairs on my mom's wedding day. She didn't remember that event at all. She knew that like two people were getting married. So literally erasing away all representation of them. Um, and there's another one of her sister where I erased the eyes on the person. And that was, she was sort of like, that person looks like my sister, but I can't quite
Uh,
my sister. So erasing away an element to try to speak to that. So a lot of them were kind of in a response to conversation with her. And then there were some where I did take liberties, like the combination ones where I kind of talk about conflation. So just kind of taking two events and just trying to morph them together.
Thank you. Wow, that's fascinating. What a great creative approach.
Thank you.
Joel, unmute yourself, Joel.
I'm saying goodbye. I have to take care of my wife.
Oh, okay.
As
Best to Barb.
But thank you. I enjoyed seeing this.
Okay,
Well,
bye.
Bye, Joel.
Bye-bye.
Richard, did you have a
Yeah,
question
I was
about-
wondering if Will could talk a little bit about the sequencing process with his designer and that transition from what was in the maquette to what was the final book.
Yeah. So as you saw, the maquette was quite a bit larger. And Tiffany did a really good job of kind of succincting all of my thoughts down. So to talk a little bit about the process of actually constructing the book, it was made during COVID, so all of this was done via Zoom, which was a bit difficult, but there was a lot of sending different sequences back and forth, and talking about things that we thought were important. Um, and it was really good in working with her because in my mind it existed one way, but how it was existing outwardly to the rest of the world, it didn't function that way. So she thought that it would be a good idea to kind of start off with an introduction, the photo of my Nana as a young girl, kind of setting the scene in terms of the place. You see the second floor front in the house, then showing my Nana again with my grandfather. So just trying to have it function more like a story, and setting the scene, showing the characters. Rather than the way that I was kind of working with the maquette, which I would say was more of a response to a lot of the photo books that I was inspired by.
Mhm.
But when we did kind of get into the sequencing, we did, use some of those kind of visual elements to go back and forth between the images to get the pacing right.
What
And
were
what-
some of the books that
My
influenced you?
question, yeah.
Oh yeah. So The Disappearance of Joseph Plummer, which Overlapse put out. Another one would be Christian Patterson's Redhead Peckerwood. It's really interested in the way that he used the archive
Mhm.
with the contemporary. There's another book. It's kind of a book. It's by Andre Bradley. It's called Dark Archives.
Hmm.
It's a folder that has some pamphlets and some inserts in it. And they're archival images along with his text. It's really interesting. And another one by Daniel Shea called Bilsner, Illinois.
Or
Also has
Blisner.
what?
Yeah, Bilsner or Blisner. Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and it has like a longer title, an index of work as labor as work or something like that. And then Mikhail Schmidt's Einheit, I was really interested in the way that he used the pacing in that book.
Mhm.
Really long book, but there's a lot of really interesting photos and how he kind of plays them off of one another. And also there's how he uses archival imagery. He rephotographed a lot of things. There's a lot of pixelation of images and stuff like that. So yeah.
Mhm.
Really
Richard,
interesting.
what did you think, Richard, when you first saw the sequence? Did it make any sudden impressions on you?
Well, I think he captured the uh, the disconnection of what you remember and what you don't, and the fact that there really was a real person there with real artifacts of a life. But even those, it's sort of interesting. Even those were slightly out of reach.
Mm.
Just in, you were presenting things, and without really understanding the book, you don't quite know what are those things. And that metaphor of distance within the pictures you put together, I thought it had a nice rhythm to it. And you resisted the urge to do anything jarring, which I think is appropriate. I lost a sister to Alzheimer's last fall, and it was amazing how many of the anecdotes you told, George, were identical.
I know.
That exactly the same things begin to focus a person's attention on things from the past. And I had several calls. Didn't our mother just die? Are we going to the funeral?
Mhm.
This is 20 years after the event. So yeah, I thought it's a very sensitive portrait of that will, and I really like it. And I hope you have some more things in the hopper.
Thank you very much.
Peter.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed looking through your book here this evening. A couple things. I think, yeah, the erasure images. One thing that stands out to me as I sort of think about it is, they're unsettling, and I think a lot of us who know someone that we were really close to who has dementia, it can be very unsettling as it starts to sink in that these people are developing an irreversible disease. And so that is what sort of in part resonated with me in some of those images, not just them forgetting, but just that unsettling feeling. But then the other is, tell me a little bit about the dogs. And did that come out of some of the conversation, like the trees?
Yeah, so the dogs, I think, were a good kind of placeholder for her moods, the different moods that I would see with her. There was, she could be more docile, then she could be more alert, or there's times where she could almost be animated or angry. So I thought that the dogs were kind of a good metaphor, different moods that we could see.
I like the dog on the fence, the straining at the leash
Yeah.
was a nice figure of speech. So one of the things that I've always found when I talk about my father and his progress through Alzheimer's is people shutting down. Like they don't want to hear you talking about that.
Mhm.
I don't know if you had that experience at all.
I think so. I mean, I found that the project's not it's not easy to talk about. Um, and thank you for having me to kind of speak about it. But yeah, I think that there are times where people don't want to discuss it because maybe they're fearful that it's something that they might go through. And even talk, I worry about my parents, whether or not we'll have to deal with that with them. So I do think that there's, yeah, the shutting down, the kind of fear of what might be to come for them or for a loved one, be a reason as to why they maybe don't want to, aren't as receptive or.
Right.
I just wanted to mention that breakfast shot, that long exposure was genius.
Thank you.
What a terrific image.
Thank you very much.
Robert.
So, first, Will, I apologize. I lost contact for about 8 minutes because we keep losing the power here in the Hudson Valley of New York.
Oh.
So I missed some of the description, and I will go back and watch the video to see what I missed. But if I'm understanding from what I did probably miss, you actually manipulated and erased certain parts of the images,
Yeah.
make them sort of, in a way, an artful representation of what was going on for your Nana. Am I understanding that?
Yeah. I mean, what I thought was maybe going on for her, in response to like conversations I had when I would show her the images. Yeah.
So my wife and I just got back from a workshop making handmade artists' books.
Okay.
And we both, so she chose to take a whole mess of her family photos, 7 generations worth of her family photos, and put it into an artist's book. And I took some family photos as well. I brought some family photos as well to work on, but I worked on a piece on older people in Nicaragua in a small village. Many of the people are in their 80s, 90s, and hundreds. Wow. None of the folks that we encountered there were experiencing dementia the way you've described it. But for both my wife and I, one of the things that I brought with us was this quote from the poet Virgil, which I think in a way is very apt to the technique that you used to represent your grandmother's experience. And the quote is this: "No day shall erase you from the memory of time."
Mm.
And here, it's not the day that made the erasures, it's the artist that made the erasures in service of telling your grandmother's story at the end of her life, which I thought was very, very moving. The other thing that I just noticed was you talked about starting to get a little bit worried about your parents and whether that would, and may I ask how old you are right now?
I'm 34.
Okay. So you realize that someday somebody's going to wonder about you. Yeah. All of us here on the call are all going to get old. All of us are going to die, and some of us are going to go through some pretty serious medical issues by the end of life. And so it's always interesting to me to think about the photographs that I brought to this workshop I made when I was in my 50s. Well, now I'm as old as some of the people I photographed at the time. And so I have a very different perspective on aging and health and just the memories that go along with all of that. So
it strikes me that there's a kind of insider outsider perspective here, and that flips between kindness and cruelty. There's a way that I think about my father, and certain ways that in interacting with him on a day-to-day basis, I thought, oh, well, this is between he and I, this is an act of kindness, a gesture of respect. This is dealing with his life in the present. And for my mother, also being on the inside, this was cruel. This was, her ability to roll with the punches, so to speak, was very limited. And I think that when the people who were working in the memory care unit would observe us together, they would gravitate towards me and say, it's wonderful to see you with your father, and these are people who see him 24/7. And the way that they responded to a fellow. I mean, I felt a fellowship with their work. Will, I don't know whether you had that experience. You did a lot of caretaking.
Yeah, I helped my mom out as much as I could. And I would say that my mom, it was more of a cruel kind of situation for my mom. In that, my Nana didn't really recognize who she was to her. She was kind of just this caretaker. And with my Nana, I had more of this kind of friendship role. So kind of she would do things for me that she maybe wouldn't do for my mom, in terms of like, she needed to drink water. I could easily get her to drink more water. It's like little things. So yeah, I would say that there was this kind of, I guess, insider outsider role that you talked about, and that relationship, the fellowship that you kind of felt with the memory care takers. Yeah.
It's interesting in what you're just saying there. I mean, as anyone who's been through this might know, there are moments where you get angry because, this is really frustrating. But I didn't, at least in going through this tonight, I didn't detect 1 ounce of that. You kept, the sympathetic and loving memory is really what pulses through this book. And I guess I have to admire the restraint.
You obviously had those moments of anger.
Yeah, well, sure.
Yeah. And then there was the kind of, you just have to make peace with it, because it doesn't help you to be angry about it, and it also just doesn't help the person as well.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to ask Robert a question, because I brought up and was just paging through some of those Nicaraguan portraits, which are lovely, lovely photographs with a very, a very old feel. But how did you, if you're saying you're making an art book with those photographs, what do you do with a collection of images like that?
So part of the goal of the workshop was to learn how to structure and create a handmade book. The instructor gave us lots and lots of examples, and you sort of had to be slightly advanced in terms of bookmaking. So I'm not good at those kinds of book arts, the sewing of the binding and the placing of the book.
Okay.
That's why my wife comes, because she's superb at it. So I basically provide the content, although in her case, she brought her family photos. I provide the content, she provides the skill in putting the book together.
Okay.
I should add that that's the case for me as well. My girlfriend, now my wife at the time, or my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, put this together for me when we were in grad school. She is skilled at book arts as well.
Did she influence the sequencing?
No, I mean, we would talk about that a little bit, but most of that was done I was in a photo books class. So a lot of that, and then I did an independent study my final semester with the photo books teacher.
Oh, cool.
Kind of done with him.
I know you were at UArts also, and that's a sort of tragic loss of that institution recently.
Yeah, that and PAFA, Philadelphia Academy of Fine Arts, closed as well, or will be closing at the end of this semester. Yeah, it seems like a lot of
Tough
institutions.
times,
Yeah.
tough times. Well, Will, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to be able to talk through our interestingly similar and also dissimilar stories. And anyone else have any last questions before we say goodnight?
It's
No?
a very moving work. The more you think about it, it's really,
Yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah, beautiful book.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed. It brought out things in me that I didn't know that I felt or had forgotten. So thank you for that gift.
Thank you for sharing.
I have, for those of you who might be interested in supporting Photobook Banter, there's a Venmo link that I put in the chat. Would be grateful for your support. But I look forward to seeing everyone again next month, whether you support it or not. You'll show up, and that'll be great. I'll be circulating news about next month's speaker and very soon.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evenings. Will,
Life.
take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, George.
You're welcome, Will. Real pleasure.
Yeah. And please share, I don't know how I get on the list, but I would like to come maybe to the next one. So yeah, please.
I'll be sure that you're on my email list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, take care. See you soon.